Okay. So I'm here today with Roelof and Emily, two fellow co-founders of Blue Lotus, who both, along with myself, have had spiritual emergences. And this is evidence of my argument that a spiritual emergence or shamanic initiatory crisis is a rite of passage. So Emily, Roelof, how are you two doing today?
I'm great, thank you. I'm really delighted to be invited to join this discussion because it's an issue so close to my heart.
Roelof?
Yeah, I'm well. I'm glad to be a part of this discussion as well.
Now I want to start off with asking both of you, whoever's ready to go first, when was your initiatory crisis, and what happened?
I'd be happy to go first.
Okay.
So my initiatory crisis was when I was almost 21, and yeah, what happened was a very bizarre sequence of events. I think what led up to it, I was raped about 4 months before it happened, and then well, I mean, to be fair, it's the only time in my life that it's like that's happened on a physical level. And also I took a psychotropic drug for the first time, like around, so I think there was quite a lot that I was integrating. But basically what happened was I just completely lost the thread of normal reality, and I started to really understand the the archetypal side of life, like really seeing truth in a lot of Bible stories that I'd never understood the relevance of before, because my education was very strongly scientific, so I'd never understood the religious side. And then suddenly I was seeing truth in all of these religious stories, and I was thinking, oh my God, I'm that, I'm that, I'm that. And there was just no end to the chain of understanding that my mind went on. And eventually I thought I must be dead, because there's no way that a human being would be able to perceive these things. So it was quite huge, and I was, shocked to the very core. It was like I'd learned that I didn't exist. So it was massive, and yes, it was a rite of passage. But yeah, the difficulty was I couldn't tell anyone what I'd actually seen, because I knew that there was no social framework to hold that.
Wow.
So I had to keep it a secret.
Yeah, well, for me, it was late 2012, and I think it was a culmination of all kinds of things coming together. I was on drugs for ADD, which I think was a misdiagnosis. I was in a very toxic relationship. I was studying, I was working, and that didn't go well. And I had some other personal problems, and it just all came together. And I remember just spinning out of control mentally. but I did connect to like my awareness expanded, and I was able to see more connections between things I wasn't able to see before. So we've spoken about this before, but that was some of you have had this experience as well. But for me, it was very much like that.
Did you feel it was a rite of passage for you?
Yes, because I was getting to know more than I'd had known before. So I was elevated to a higher level for a brief period of time. And later I went there again. Um, and it has, I sometimes say I've lost my mind, but I found my soul during those, um, yes, during those experiences.
So you think it's this, would you say, being that you found your soul, that it was a spiritual rite of passage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other aspect is what I've learned from my anthropology course as a liminal experience, which is that transition of not existing as what you were before and finding that new self. Would either of you want to expand on that?
Sure. So that was really strongly what happened in my experience. It was almost like, the very scary part of it that I've just described is all about losing the old self. But then the birth of the new self, when I returned to my body, was very much gratitude and joy and really desiring to live a life of service to others, which had never been my focus before. So it was almost like it was the complete shedding of all of my solely selfish tendencies. And that was an enormous shift.
Roelof?
For me, it was a bit different. It was a more gradual thing to get to wanting to be of service to others, because that's something that's in me as well, and using my talents for that. I did go back. I did revert to my old patterns for quite a while, because it was so different, and I was used to those patterns, so it seemed safe, but they were no longer satisfactory deep down.
Yeah. So that sounds like you did have a little resistance to the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you find that you lost yourself a little bit and found a new self?
Yeah.
Lose a little bit of social status?
Yeah, I did. I mean, for the people that knew me from a distance, because I don't have that much people close to me, but like acquaintances and friends, my parents' friends and stuff like that, and those people, they probably saw what happened or heard about what happened and might have their thoughts about that. But I mean, what can I do about that?
Yeah. And the other aspect is the resistance to change. From my perspective, I did have a little resistance to change. I think that's why it took me a while to figure out my calling as a healer. And I do think that this a shamanic initiatory crisis is that shedding of old self to become responsible for helping others. I think that's why so many in the community do feel the the calling to be a healer. But I don't think it's just resistance on a personal level. I've also found that it's resistance on a societal level. Have either of you felt that way as well?
When I was in the experience and witnessing the falling away of the old, the only future that I could conceive of myself was a future in a psychiatric institution, because I knew that that was the only box that I was going to be able to fit into. And when I woke up from the near-death experience, I took the fact that I'd woken again as kind of like a sign that actually I could heal myself and I didn't need to go into that psychiatric box. And so the resistance was the sort of 18 months following that event, where I just had chronic anxiety, like trying to desperately stay out of the psychiatric system. And, you know, I did a reasonable amount of integration, but in the end, I did end up in the psychiatric system 8 years later, because I obviously hadn't done enough of the work, or I hadn't got all of the pieces sorted out. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of resistance and a lot of fear of the unknown and a lot of awareness of kind of how many aspects of my way of being that I had kind of taken for granted. So it's been a very difficult journey with a lot of, you know, resistance to change.
Yeah, for me as well, I do agree with the societal framework not supporting it. If you deviate from the norm, you can be put in the mental health system. They can even force you, and that's what's happened to me a couple of times. And it hasn't been a helpful experience to me. It hasn't helped me heal and grow. So as soon as I was able to find out a way, or work out a way how to stabilize myself and be able to heal and grow myself, I did that.
Where do either of you think the societal resistance comes from? For me, when I was in that state, I could smell the fear on the medical practitioners who were aiding me. And I'm often wonder if it is the medical community having fear, or if there is concern for a loss of power.
I think it has to do with, they sometimes say, try and eliminate the mental health stigma. And they say that the people that work in the psychiatric system say that. And that is something I think that is impossible, because their system is to stigmatize you. As soon as you walk in the door, they say, you have this, you deviate from the norm, so this is the label that goes with that, and here are some pills. If that isn't stigma, I don't know what is. So that their business is to stigmatize and to perpetuate that. So I do think that has to do a lot with it.
Emily?
You're muted.
Sorry. I think the reason, I agree with you 100% what you're saying, and I think the reason why that happens is because people who believe only in the material world and don't have any sense of faith in existence beyond the material have a fear of things that can't be in the material. I think the material is safe and the physical world is safe for a lot of people because it appears very fixed, and therefore nothing can kind of come out of the unknown. And the idea that the material world might be fluid is just terrifying. And, you know, people just don't want to face that fear. And I have a huge amount of empathy for that, because in a way you could say that the rite of passage that I've just described is the exact, you know, almost me being forced to take in that truth that the world is not material. And because it was very painful, you know, I guess I can have a lot of empathy and compassion for the people who don't want to take that in yet.
I like that you bring up the material world, because that is part of my argument over the shedding of the ego. It's a shedding of the material self for the spiritual self. Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that, I have been drawing from the spiritual more and more. I am following a spiritual program now to work on something I'm going through, and that has been immensely helpful so far. If that element hadn't been included in that, I wouldn't have made as much progress. So for me, that's a key ingredient.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think that the spiritual understanding of the world, and it has a much stronger foundation than the physical understanding, because with the spiritual understanding, there's always it's almost like the material understanding just kind of sweeps the whole issue of death kind of under a carpet. And, you know, it's almost like people walk around pretending that they'll never have to face that fear. Whereas once you've faced it and embraced it, and you understand that, you know, consciousness is fluid, never ending, eternal, you know, that really, that is a rite of passage, because then you become a person with completely different attitudes towards life, because that fear is no longer governing your actions.
I agree, very true. Yay. Thank you, Roelof and Emily, for this discussion today. And I can't wait to upload it. I think that went really well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Cristina. See you guys soon.
See ya.